We all make bad decisions every now and then, and in today's video I'm going to share 10 plants with you that I have grown or attempted to grow that I would not bother getting again. Hey everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Sometimes you see a plant online and it looks quite nice and you think, hey, it's a good idea to get one of those. Or sometimes you're at a nursery and there's a plant on sale and it's kind of too good of an offer to say no to. So in today's video I want to show you some of those plants. Now, regret is probably too strong of a word. I wouldn't say I necessarily regret getting these plants, but over years of either looking after these plants or trying to grow them, I've learned that this is just not necessarily the plant for me to grow. And there could be various reasons for that. It could be that the plant just doesn't like me and my conditions, so it doesn't actually want to grow. It could be that the plant likes me too much and it grows too fast and it's just too much work. It could be that the plant is just kind of ugly and I don't enjoy looking after it, so it kind of takes away precious space that I could use for a different plant, and so on. But as we go through them, I'll kind of explain to you a little more why I wouldn't necessarily get this plant again. And straight up, if you actually enjoy some of these plants that I'm about to show you, don't let me influence you. We're all different, we all have different preferences, we all have different environments, we all have different experiences, so you grow whatever you want to grow. But yeah, this is my list of plants that I wouldn't get again. So I suppose my personal preference for aesthetics and care requirements is heavily influencing this list. First one over here is my Philodendron Ring of Fire, and I actually just recently made a full plant spotlight on this plant. It's not the worst, to be honest. I could maybe consider growing it again, especially right now. It's growing so nicely actually. It's split itself a couple of times over here, so I have many growth points on here at the moment, so it's gonna get really nice and lush. And the variegation when it comes through is super nice as well, but there is a couple of things that I really don't like about this plant. Mainly, it is a huge space commitment. I mean, look at this plant right now, and I've already managed the space using a moss pole. Due to the moss pole, it only grows on 1/2 of the pot, right? If it wasn't for the moss pole, this would take up twice as much space. So to me, growing indoors, this plant is too much of a space commitment, and I wouldn't necessarily get it again because it's taking up just too much space. Also, and I think that's the case with all of these jungle boogies, this plant gets these yellow dots. I don't know if you can see them. These yellow dots super easily. And I don't think it's pests. Oh, let me put it down, it's too heavy. I don't think it's pests. I do think it's most likely extra floral nectaries, but I've actually seen that on every single one of these Philodendron Nero, Jungle Boogie, Ring of Fire, Dragon, Oreo, all of them. Like, you know, all of the ones that kind of looks like little tiger tooth thingies. And I just don't necessarily like that. So, look, while I have it, and it's grown nicely, I'm not complaining, but the variegation is also fading over time, so it kind of, if it's not actively growing, and it hasn't been actively growing over the last few months since we've been in winter/autumn, I just don't think it's really the nicest plant to look at, and the space commitment is just too much for me. So I wouldn't get it again, but while I have it, I'm gonna try and make the best out of it. I'm gonna try and grow it, and I'm gonna try and grow it nice and large and with lots of nicely variegated leaves and so on. But if I wouldn't have it and I would see it at a nursery right now, even if it would be at a really good price, I wouldn't necessarily bother getting it. And back in the days, this one was super desired, and it just came out of tissue culture, and they had the first drop at Bunnings, and I went to every single Bunnings in the world to look if they've got it. Couldn't find it. Timmy ended up being in Dubbo for a weekend, and I even sent him to the Bunnings in Dubbo, and he found some there. So it was a bit of an act to even get this plant, and it was not worth it. Oh well. Next one, same problem as with the Ring of Fire. This is my Philodendron Sodiroy, and the space commitment for this plant is just too much. I have used twine over here to tie the petioles to each other, so it's not the craziest, but look at this. From here to here, this takes up way too much space. This plant used to be part of my wall of aeroids where I have all of my velvets, and I know technically this one is not velvet, but because this one in Verrucosum makes a majestic hybrid and I have the majestic on there as well, I kind of wanted to include it as well. You know, I wanted it to be like my wall of hardleaf philodendron, the species and their hybrids kind of. You know, I like that idea. It's kind of cool when people come and visit and I tell them, hey, if you cross this one with this one, you get this one. Look at the features and so on. But it was taking up way too much space. You know, this plant takes up more space than my Verrucosum, Gigas and Milano combined, and space is precious. And the leaves are not that nice, especially when it matures. I'll insert some videos of when this plant was more juvenile, and I actually really like the juvenile form of this. Because it has really nice back sides as well. When juvenile, the backs are more pinkish when they come out and have this nice veining. The silver splotches kind of fade a lot over time as well and with maturity, so it's probably not really a plant that I would get again. And to be honest, I didn't even give this plant like the best conditions possible to try and mature it. I didn't actually want to grow this super mature, and the exact same happened with my majestic as well. I love the majestic hybrid of this in Verrucosum when it's juvenile, but that plant matured too quickly for me and didn't really look that nice anymore. So I wouldn't necessarily get it again, I think. I think if I want a hardleaf philodendron with silverish markings, I would probably get a Brandtianum. Much harder time getting that to maturity, but I suppose I didn't enjoy the maturity over here. So less of a space commitment, but you still get heart-shaped leaves with silver splotches. But I've already got it, so might as well make the best out of it. What I've done is I've chopped the stem. Where's the first chop? Here, 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 here. Now I can see that a couple of these cuttings have kind of shriveled up a little bit, don't look too healthy, but I can see a growth point here, I can see a growth point here. Yeah, actually that's it. Not all too many growth points, unfortunately. But also the mother plant, as a result of chopping here, the mother plant is now producing slightly smaller leaves again. Not the prettiest. In spring I'll probably do further chops to basically grow a smaller plant. I rather have a lush pole with 2 or 3 more juvenile plants on here than growing one specimen to maturity, just to reduce the space commitment. And then maybe I'll feel a little bit better about this plant again. Maybe I'll just park you here. You can be nice. Hello, Bradley. You taking care of this? Surprise, surprise, there's gonna be a couple of alocasias in this list. Alocasia, Friedeck, and I also want to talk about the green velvet, because to be honest, I'm having as hard of a time with the green velvet as I have with the Friedeck. This is actually the best it's ever done. So we are on somewhat of an upwards trajectory, but it's almost been a year of growing this, and I've put a lot of effort into this plant actually, until I was told to just put less effort into it, give it worse conditions, and neglect it a little bit, and so on. And that seems to have done the trick, but I also know that with neglecting alocasias, there will 100% be spider mites eventually. So I feel like I look at this plant and I'm just constantly waiting for it to deteriorate again, and it's not nice. I don't like that. This is not how I like to run my hobby. This is not how I enjoy doing these things. You know, I want to be confident in my plants and that they're gonna grow and that they're gonna recover and all of this, and not constantly worry like, is it dead tomorrow? Worry might be a little bit of an overstatement. It's not keeping me up at night, but you know what I mean. I don't have the confidence in this plant, and neither do I have the confidence with the green velvet. To be honest, I've grown this one better than I've ever grown the green velvet. The green velvet is, yeah, always had droopy leaves, always had spider mites for me. I put it in the garden. That's the one time it actually started doing well until winter hit, but I hope it's just dormant. Now, I know that the solution to my problem with alocasias is most likely semi-hydro or some other setup than my aeroid mix. My aeroid mix has worked well for my Alocasia cuprea and has worked okay for some of my plants outside as well, but it doesn't seem to work with alocasias at large. I know that I probably would have to change something in relation to the way that I care for this plant, but I have been growing plants in aeroid mix for 5 to 6 years now, 6-ish years almost, and I've had great success with it. And my entire watering routine, my nutrient routine, my setup, the pots, the planters, everything that I've got, the way that I decorate my apartments, the way that I water my plants, everything is tuned in to using my chunky aeroid mix. That's how I like to grow it. That makes me comfortable and I have heaps of it. If I would now switch my alocasias to semi-hydro, I feel like it would be a brand new learning curve, which isn't bad because, you know, I do want to keep this hobby interesting. So I most likely will try some semi-hydro with some of my alocasias. But just the idea of having to give my alocasias special treatment over all the other plants makes me think that, you know what, maybe they're just not my plants to grow. I would just not get it again. Because getting alocasias now and then knowing that you have to give them a semi-hydro setup for them to really thrive just isn't necessarily what I want to do. I don't think they're nice enough for me to now learn a whole new way of caring for my plants and get a whole range of new products and different pots with different sources where it can sit in and test the pH of the water and test the pH with the nutrients and pH balancing and buffer. Look, I don't know if everybody does that. I'm sure a lot of people just put it in the self-watering pot and hope for the best. But, you know, just technically the thought of now getting into semi-hydro just for the sake of alocasias is a bit overwhelming and just makes me rather give up on the alocasia. But see how we go. I'm sure in spring when the conditions are a little bit better and, you know, I'm on top of all of my plant care and everything is thriving, and I'll probably be a little more motivated and I'm probably a little more interested in exploring a little bit more. But yeah, for now, wouldn't get it again. Also wasn't the cheapest. At least these days, they're cheap. Next one, and I spoke about this plant in my struggle bus video, but I wanted to include it again because it's definitely a plant I would not get again. This is my Philodendron Florida Ghost. I got this as a teeny tiny tissue culture plant exactly 1 year ago and is still a teeny tiny tissue culture plant. Yay! Let me show you a comparison. I bought this Florida Beauty at the same time, also as a teeny tiny tissue culture plant, and it has grown so nicely in the same period of time. So yeah, the Florida Ghost clearly doesn't like me all too much. Did that stop me from getting a second one? No! Because the way that I am, I'm like, maybe it was just a dud, let's try one more time. So of course I got another one. I got this one not as a teeny tiny tissue culture plant, I got this as a more established plant, and the first thing it did is drop all of its leaves. And now I'm slowly growing them back. I do actually appreciate this minty leaf over here, but by now I'm already so pissed off at this plant that this plant really has to deliver. You know what I mean? This one needs to really outperform other plants for me to get over the trauma. Don't take every word I say so seriously. But you know what I mean. I'm kind of like a little bit negatively minded about this plant, and it really needs to show up to redeem itself. So at this stage, I would not get this plant again because I just don't think it's that rewarding of a grower. I would much rather get the Florida Beauty. Next up, and we're grouping these two together, we're going to talk about variegated Monstera adansonii. Let's talk about this one first because it's actually growing well, and it's the kind of the silver lining that makes me think, you know what, maybe it's not my most hated plant after all. It's growing a nice leaf, it's growing some nice leaves. Of course, the fully white portions are going brown pretty quickly, especially over the cooler season at the moment because the conditions just aren't that great. But it is actually growing. This is my third attempt of growing a variegated adansonii, and it's the first time it is doing something that is not just fully white leaves. Now I understand that there's many different types of variegated Adansonii. I'm not an expert in that field, but just the speed in which different varieties with random names like Snowdrift, Blizzard, Storm, to me it just sounds like somebody is taking the piss over here. When I saw this plant at the Collectors Plant Fair, I actually saw the mother plant right then and there, and the mother plant looked good, and I was like, you know what, this is a really nice large form Adansonii. It also has nice variegation, so let's try one of its offshoots. But that was the first time I've actually ever seen a nice variegated Adansonii matured, ever. I've not really seen them nice. I've always ever seen them kind of small. Yeah, some have nice variegation, but I've never really seen them grown into a nice, lush, large plant like a variegated Deliciosa, for example, has been grown into. So I do think that generally we're all struggling with them. And just a couple of years ago, a cutting would have set you back like $4,000-$5,000, which is ridiculous. I got this one for 65 bucks. So I figured let's try one more time. But if this doesn't eventuate, I'm so done with this. I don't want to do this anymore. I've been trying it for 2.5 years now, and this is the most success I've got to show for. In the same period of time, I've grown full-on plants from tissue culture into huge giants that I can decorate my apartment with. This one is not a candidate for me to decorate my apartment with. This one is still stuck somewhere in the corner, waiting for this to finally do something. Now, talking about the Snow, Blizzard, Storm, whatever, this one apparently is called Indonesian Marble. And I have seen plants around that look very similar but named differently. I don't know if they're different or not. I bought it because it was at a good price, and I really enjoy the fenestrations of this plant actually. I think it looks good in front of my white shirt as well. You should be able to see these kind of funky looking fenestrations quite well. The variegated part, however, is making this plant look very sick. Look at this leaf, for example. You've got the green half that looks nice. The variegated half looks deformed. Same over here. The variegation seems to just make this part very much deformed. Here, it's probably one of the better leaves up there. But yeah, in general, like look at this. Look at, again, this side that has less variegation. Looks okay until we hit this variegation part here. But the other half, the inside half, looks absolutely like almost non-existent because the variegation is really holding it back. So I know that this is definitely a different type to this one. It's very obvious. You can see the difference, but with this type, I feel like the variegation is like not good. Some people say a lot of the variegation can be caused by viruses, right? So maybe it's actually just diseased, and that's why it's variegated rather than it being a mutation. I don't know what it is. It hasn't spread to anything else, so I'm not necessarily worried about it being a viral infection that can take over my whole collection. I don't know. Maybe this is just the way that the plant grows. But if that's the way that the plant grows, I would definitely not get it again. You know, if the variegation is causing the plant to look deformed, and I've witnessed that with a lot of variegated Adansonii, various types with various names, and to be honest, I have no desire to research into this. I'm not a botanist. I grow plants for aesthetic purposes. I grow them, I look at them, and I judge them by the way that they look, not by the taxonomy or not by the origin or the way that it, you know what I mean? I don't really care. I didn't go into this hobby to be a botanist or to be a scientist about it. I want this to be like a really chilled hobby, like a fun hobby, and not like a research job. Each to their own. Some people enjoy that part. Anyway, I'm going way off topic. The reason I would just not choose variegated Adansonii again is because they always kind of look sick and hardly ever impressive. So look, I'll keep growing these two while I got them, and I'll also keep you updated. I've got videos coming for both of these, hopefully over the course of 12 months, but quite clearly, I don't think these videos are going to show you anything majorly impressive. So, see how we go. Let's put you back in the corner where you can hide until you're pretty, yeah? Next one, my Philodendron rugosum, also known as the pigskin philodendron. And it has the most amazing texture. Very unique, very different to any other plant I've ever grown. Look, I was gifted 3 tiny, tiny, tiny seedlings. Like they were smaller than my little pinky snail. And I grew it into this. So it's a good grower. It grows well for me, but it doesn't look nice. And I mean, AJ had a really mature one, Tim from Grow Vertical had a really mature one, and I saw them in person. And while I was impressed with their growth, I'm not impressed with the end result, if you know what I mean. I think it would be an interesting one to make hybrids with potentially, but that's not really something I'm super interested in doing, at least with philodendron. Tim from Grow Vertical does that, and I reckon he could make something really nice because it has this unique texture to it, right? But for me, as somebody who grows these plants to want to create nice aesthetic displays, I don't think this will ever grow into a nice aesthetic display, if you know what I mean. It's gonna be that plant in the corner of the room that, you know, of course I don't want it to die and I'm happy for it to grow, and it's a cool plant to show people when they come over and like, hey, touch this plant, and they're gonna be like, oh wow, crazy texture. But am I gonna have this like in the corner of the room that I see all the time? Like, you know, is that gonna be like my statement piece? Are you gonna see me shake this one on Instagram trying to go viral? Absolutely not. I think it's... the little yellow discolorations don't help it either. There could also be me providing too much water, but yeah, I'm just not digging the aesthetics. That's it. You are just a little bit too ugly. Sorry. Talking about ugly, this is ugly because I've neglected it. Fair enough. I think this is in desperate need for a repot. I think it's also a little bit sunburned. It got a little bit too close to the grow lights. Where is it? Somewhere. I saw it earlier. Here. But that's not necessarily the reason why it's on my list. I actually really like this plant at a stage where it was kind of quite nice and bushy, but the reason I'm going to include this is because I really wanted to grow this plant on a moss pole and grow it nice and large, and I don't think this is even possible. Actually, somebody messaged me as well saying this is not a monstera, it's a philodendron, and it was incorrectly classified back in the day, so it doesn't really matter. I don't really care about the genus, but it's not giving me monstera vibe. It's not giving me this like, yeah, I want to grow up a moss pole and I'm going to grow nice fenestrations and so on. And I've grown many monsteras really successfully. I've grown Adansonia nicely, Dubia nicely, El Salvador, Silta Pecana, Pinati Patita. Actually, all the monsteras that I've grown have been quite successful, apart from the variegated Adansonii, as well as this one. Oh, and the Standeliana. Standeliana also, I don't have one anymore, it's dead. But also very disappointing. So I would just not get this again, because I got this planning on growing it vertically, and it's just, it doesn't do anything when you grow it vertically. It's just grows the same, but it doesn't really change in leaf shape. It doesn't look nice. So now that I have it, I'll grow it trailing, but I'm not a big trailing plant person, so I just wouldn't really get it again. And to be honest, I also never really seen a really nice specimen online. I've never seen anybody like, hey, look at this Monstera Peru and how amazingly nice this is growing and how this is the nicest plant in my collection. Feel like in everybody's collection this is just a filler. I don't know, maybe I'm projecting. Actually, small correction. It's not like I don't like trailing plants. I think there's some plants that trail really nicely. Like, you know, pothos can be really nice. I've got a few nice trailing plants in my greenhouse as well. The lipstick pagoda plant, Ripsalis can look really nice trailing. I've got the red arrow syngonium in my greenhouse, you know. There are nice trailing plants, don't get me wrong, but I don't think this one is the nice one, you know what I mean? I don't think this would be my first choice if I'm looking for a trailing plant. And on top of that, it doesn't really grow the best for me either. So yeah. Oh well. Next one. This is my Philodendron biliatii. Yay! It still exists. See this? See this stump? That is it. And it's actually hard as well. Not even rotten yet. Wow. Let me explain. This is actually my second attempt at growing Billy. And last year it also died back because I'm growing this plant in my garden, and it's just a little too cold in Sydney for this plant to survive the winter. So it drops all of its leaves and petioles due to some sort of fungal issues. Now, why am I growing this outdoors when I know that they don't really cope with the outdoors? Well, it's coming back to the same problem that I had with the Ring of Fire and my Sodiroy. It takes up way too much space. I've grown one quite nicely for a while, and it started having ginormous petioles. Really nice leaves, but mainly really long petioles in all directions. And while I don't mind the look of this plant, I do think it looks really nice. I don't think it's worth the real estate that it takes up, at least for me. Preferences are different, but I personally would not get a billy again, because I don't even want to grow the billy nice and large, because I wouldn't know what to do with the billy. And if I don't want to grow it nice and large, I'm not going to buy a plant to then just purposely neglect it, or buy a plant to then purposely put it in a corner where it's not going to get enough light to grow. They might as well not get the plant. I don't even know why. I kind of had a weak moment, and it was really inexpensive at Bunnings, and I was like, oh, let's get another one. Maybe I just got unlucky. But my plan was always to do the same with this one that I did with the first one. Put it back outside and just hope that maybe it unaliving itself in the first year was just a coincidence. Well, it turns out it wasn't. But now I have confirmation that this is definitely not my plant to grow, because it doesn't like the outside and I don't like it inside. So be it. Can't just have one alocasia on the list. I gotta give a shout out to at least two, and this one is probably my second least favorite out of all of them, the Alocasia Jacqueline. Now, when it grows, I think it actually has some of the most amazing leaves. I love the back sides, I love the front side, I love the texture. But that texture also makes it by far the worst candidate for spider mites. Also, last year I've grown this in my greenhouse, and I tried to give it one of the prime spots, and it grew a whopping 2 leaves over the whole spring and summer, just for it to then go dormant again. So yeah, while the new leaves look really nice, and I love when they come out, and I love when they look good, there's just not enough of them for the plant in itself to really look nice. Like, it kind of looks cool in the greenhouse, even if it just has one leaf. That one leaf definitely stands out because of the texture, color and shape. But would I buy a whole plant just to look at one leaf in perpetuity? No. Is it my fault? I think so. I've seen people have better success growing them. If you can grow this nicely and conveniently, and you don't mind doing very frequent pest treatments with this plant, then it's actually a really rewarding one to grow. I already have plants like a Verrucosum that is a bit of a pest magnet, and I really like Verrucosum. So with the Verus, I'm more than willing to put in the effort, but if I like a plant any less than a Veru, which is basically all of them, then I will not be willing to put in the effort. I also want this to be a fun hobby and not stress-inducing. Not a plant I would choose again, but I would not hold it against you if you really like this one, actually. Actually, I won't hold it against you if you like any of them. I actually like most of these. The Rugosum and the Variegated Adansonii are probably the only two where I'm like, you're just not that pretty. But all the rest, they're actually quite nice. They would just have to be a little bit easier to grow for me to reconsider. If I'm counting correctly, there was only 9, and the 10th one is not here because the 10th one goes to Caletheas. Probably not a surprise to anybody. I think a lot of people start getting Caletheas at the beginning of their indoor journey. You know, they're readily available. You can even buy them at supermarkets. They come in so many beautiful colors and leaf shapes and have amazing patterns. And I think Caletheas are really great plants to look at. But I personally never really found success in growing them indoors. So to me, Caletheas are definitely a plant that I enjoy looking at when I go to the nursery, but I have zero intentions of picking one up and putting them in my house. Maybe one day when I have a house with a garden that I'm not just renting and I have a little bit more time to establish a garden properly, maybe then I'll consider putting a few outdoors. I think they're doing much better outdoors due to the natural pest treatment via rain and predators. But indoors, I think they're just too much of a spider mite magnet for me to really enjoy looking after them. So no Caletheas for me, and that goes for the whole family. It's not just Caletheas, it's also Gyperchias and Cynanthes and all of those, you know, no thank you. But I've seen some amazingly grown ones indoors, and if you do, they look awesome and they're nice and bushy and they can take up, like, they can be a bit of a statement, you know what I mean? They're just not worth the effort in my opinion, and I feel like it's similar with the Friedeck. Whenever I try to grow a Calethea, I'm just waiting for the moment where it's dead. Like, I don't enjoy the journey with the Calethea because I know that it's happening any moment. So yeah, just not really something I want to do. Anyway, I would love for you to let me know in the comment section down below what is a plant that you have gotten that you would not get again. Not saying that I regret getting any of these plants, because a lot of these plants have taught me some lessons and now I'm smarter, right? I had to get the plant and grow the plant to realize that I don't like the plant or that the plant doesn't like me. So I learned something out of it, but I wouldn't necessarily get it again. So let me know if you're in the same boat with some of these plants. Thank you so much for watching, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.